I don't think there is one probable cause of it. I think it is a multitude of multiple different things that play into it. But I strongly do believe that tech is one of the major components as to why people are moving less and becoming like we're slowly losing the ability to walk. I'm calling that out right now. Like you seen that film WALL-E?
What's
That's where the robots, and at the end it's all it's like super. I think they're like super overweight and they're all in chairs and they just sit there and everything is done for them. WALL-E's the Disney film.
Mate, I watched a program the other night. And I think it's a really famous actor, but the guy's like morbidly obese, and he gains weight because he becomes gay, cheats on his wife with one of his students, and then his new partner dies, right. And that's how he gains all the weight, and he dies at the end of it, and that's a good watch.
I honestly thought you were going to go down the route of gays is the main reason people are obese. I was like, whoa, this is definitely chat shit get cancelled today.
This guy has an agenda today.
No, but in all honesty, tech's a big component of this. I've seen it in just throughout my 20s, for example, and I think we're kind of similar ages. I was growing up through school.
You're older.
I know I'm a couple of years older, right?
You're touching 30.
30 in September. But going through school, the like online or the internet era where social media and all that, it was starting to become a thing. But we still went out and played, like gaming. As much as I was a big gamer, that was kind of like my later teenage years or my teenage years that started to happen, and that was a crux. I loved PE. I was very competitive with sport, and I think if I look at me and my brother, for example, my brother, he's obese, or he was obese, slowly kind of reversing that for himself. And here's two people under the same household, except he's 3 years younger than me, so he fell into the gaming a wee bit earlier. And I'm not saying it's because of gaming, but it's definitely technology. And I remember hearing on the TV, it's like you can jump online and play with, in your upstairs bedroom, you can play a game with someone in their downstairs living room in America. And I was like, that sounds mental. Like, how's that so fascinating? And this was what age I was, about 11 or 12. So
like Xbox 360s, isn't it?
This was the Xbox 360. I
remember that, mate. Halo.
Honestly, I remember the news talking about it when I was younger, and I was like, that sounds so cool. And that happened just as I was going into high school, and if I kind of was out playing with friends and that, but I was just as much indoors. I was still very fascinated at practicing basketball. I had a trampoline in my back garden. I used to play it for 3 years, so I was still active. But I can see how, from my brother's perspective, he had a different experience. He right from the start, that was how he communicated with friends. That's how they had fun. That's how they played. Now, he still went out, and then I guess we all go through an era of drinking, finding alcohol, drugs, and all that sort of thing. I skipped that completely. I gamed and worked out. They were my two things. His was gaming and going out with his friends and all that sort of stuff. So it's, to me, tech has a big part to play with it, because here we are, just in the last 5 years, we didn't have Uber Eats and fucking... You had to phone up the Chinese to get a Chinese takeaway. When you think about the anxiety and all that, like, people don't like speaking the phone. They're like, oh, I can just press two buttons.
I had to, genuinely, my schoolmates were so socially awkward that any time we ordered food on the phone or a restaurant, I had to do it.
Yeah, see?
For the full table.
So
then I would let them do it sometimes, and we go, and I'll be like, fucking, he wants a steak.
Aye. And that is so common, but even that is why, well, not why, but you can imagine the amount of more people that it's like, I don't need to speak to anyone. Boom, boom, I can get my takeaway now. That would have stopped people from eating out, probably, or getting a takeaway before. It's not just takeaways, like processed foods, the marketing that goes into that. That's fucking fascinating to me, that how more money goes into the marketing and engineering of a chocolate bar, of how it feels in your hands, how it tastes, how it looks, than it does the actual ingredients itself, the actual product itself.
Apparently they threw 100 million like obesity like 2 years ago or whatever, but just done it last minute. Now, I don't understand anything about government funding or how that gets distributed, or like who gets that 100 million. Do they just get it in their bank and then go, here, I have to spend this? What did I spend it on? Don't really know how any of that works, but then apparently the next year they were saying that for the next 3 years they're going to get that funding. Then the year after that, like just before it, they done away with it. And the only thing I can remember in the last few years Because you'd have think COVID would have been a shock. Like it was pretty well known that obesity was one of the biggest contributing factors to if you might.
At 4 times, I'm sure it was 3 or 4 times your chances
You
of.
would think when you that after that they would go, right, this needs to be solved.
I mean, even forget COVID for a minute. Like anything that you get, if you're obese going into that operation, that whatever it is, anything kind of medical, then your risk is higher. But equally, so it is if you're underweight. Like I think that's a lot. This is what I was trying to say actually earlier on, that the flack I got was like obesity is not like one of the main causes. Like people being underweight, there's actually more damage with people being underweight. And I'm like, yeah, there absolutely is, and that's a conversation that needs to be had. But when we're getting to close to majority of our population is edging towards being obese, there's more strain on everything.
It's a bigger problem.
Yeah, and I'm not saying one's right.
It's a more severe problem, but it's more common.
And I think that's the point I want to give it in this, because I think people listening sometimes will go, but such and such is obese and they're so healthy. Then my pal who's underweight, like I know such and such, she's skinny but she's got all these problems and whatever, and it's like, but you're not comparing apples to oranges. It's just genetically speaking, as a whole, we know there is more risks involved with it.
You're always going to get people moaning.
There's always like, but what about
We're
this?
just two men spitting facts.
Straight up facts.
Well researched.